objectives and time.
I certainly can, Charlotte. Thank you. Today, Laura will be speaking on her 4th project. She's moving along very quickly throughout the manual. I understand that you're leaving the first week of June. So she's speeding as quickly as she can through the manual. And she then on how to say it. Her objectives are to select right words and sentences and the structure to communicate her ideas clearly, accurately, and vividly. She's going to be using rhetorical devices to enhance and emphasize ideas. And she will be working on eliminating jargon and unnecessary words and use correct grammar.
Thank you.
Maddie,
Last week, we surprisingly learned that Laura has a very competitive spirit. Today, she is going to share one of her most memorable race experiences, an illustrative example of how dreams can come true with hard work and a very lucky set of circumstances. So please welcome Laura with her speech, Superfrog.
I remember as a young girl watching the Ironman World Championship on television. I watched in awe as men and women swam 2.4 miles in the ocean, rode their bikes 112 miles, and ran 26.2 miles along the coast of Kona, Hawaii. I couldn't imagine how anybody could do that, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, wondered if someday I could do that. That seed started to grow in 2007 when I did my first triathlon. 7 years and 5 Ironmans later, I was resigned to the fact that I would probably never get to Kona. You have to qualify for Kona, and to do that, you generally have to place in the top 1 or 2 positions in your age group in another race, and I just wasn't that good. I decided to take a year off after the 2014 season, until I saw the announcement. Ironman announced a partnership with the Navy SEALs Superfrog half Ironman race in San Diego, and they were giving away 20 slots to the 2015 Ironman World Championship to active duty military members. The details on slot allocation were sparse, and the race was just 3 weeks away from the date of the announcement. I looked at last year's results. Only 66 women participated in Superfrog the year prior. I looked at the race course. A 2-lap swim in the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, a 4-lap bike course that was often plagued by high winds, and a run that was done half on the beach. Ugh, it was daunting. But I thought the odds had to be good, right? How many active duty women would see this announcement, be ready to race, and have the means to travel on such short notice? I was ready, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Swimming has always been my weakest discipline, and without much experience swimming in the Pacific Ocean, I was particularly nervous about this swim. Race day brought 3 to 4 foot waves, and for those of you who have never had to swim through the ocean and were inexperienced like me, I learned that as the waves approach, you have to dive under them. As the wave comes over, it gets dark. It's a little scary in a claustrophobic sort of way, until the light penetrates the water, and then you can pop your head up with just enough time to take 1, maybe 2 breaths before the next wave comes at you, and you dive under that one. This continued for 6 to 7 waves, so in the middle of it, you feel like you're stuck in the surf, not making any progress. But eventually, I popped out from under a wave and wasn't met by another one. Instead, I was met by a giant swell and realized I could finally start to swim. But first, where was I on the course? I tried to see the buoys, but all I saw was another giant swell in front of me. Took a few strokes, tried to sight again. There it was, a giant orange buoy off in the distance. There was a south pulling current, so I had to swim at an angle on the course. A few more strokes, and I made the right-hand turn to swim into the current and parallel to the beach. This was the easiest part of the swim. Another right-hand turn, and I was headed back towards the beach. Turns out, it's even harder to swim back through the surf than it was getting out. When you're swimming, you have to, and approaching the surf zone, you have to look over your shoulder to see the waves coming so they don't crash down on top of you. As the wave approaches, you have 2 choices, depending on where you think it's going to break. You can either swim fast and try to body surf it, a skill I learned I don't possess. Or you have to turn and face it, dive under it, let it pass, turn around, and then swim forward again. So I did a lot of that. I finally made it back to the beach, a little south of the course marker because of the current. Did I mention this is a 2-lap swim? I had to run north to circle the course marker, and then back south again to the start point to do it all over again. The second lap was only slightly easier than the first. The swim was exhausting. It was my worst swim time ever for this distance, but I made it. The bike course was 4 north and south loops with 8 hairpin turnarounds. There was a strong wind coming out of the southeast, but biking had become my strongest discipline. I was passing people the entire way, except for one person. There was an active duty female that I met the day prior at registration. I knew she was in my age group and one of my competitors for the Kona slots. I knew where her bike was parked in transition, so when I exited the swim and her bike was already gone, I knew that she was ahead of me on the bike course. After the second lap, we shared a long glance as she was accelerating out of a turnaround and I was slowing down coming into it. I was close and she knew it. I worked hard to close that gap. She was about 5 minutes ahead of me going into the bike course, and I gained 3 to 3.5 minutes of that back by the end of the bike course. The run was no ordinary run. Approximately 6 miles of it were on the beach. It was high tide, so there was very little hard pack. That, coupled with the fact that it was an out and back on the beach, meant that runners were competing with each other for what little hard pack there was, while simultaneously avoiding washed up seaweed and the waves coming in. That said, it was awesome. I loved running on the beach with the light sea breeze coming in, even if the sand slowed me down. And once I got the hang of running on the sand, I actually managed to run the second half of the run faster than the first. I did see that other active duty female along the way, and she was clearly widening the gap on me. I had no idea who my other competitors were or where I stood among them. I just had to resolve to the fact that I was having a fantastic day. I was doing the very best that I could, and I would have to wait and see if that was enough. I finished the race in 5 hours and 46 minutes. Not my best time, but not my worst either, and definitely the hardest half Ironman I had ever done. Based on the number of active duty men and active duty women who started the race, women got just 4 of those slots to Kona, while the men got the other 16.
Wow. Fortunately,
My age group got 2 of those slots, and I finished second behind the active duty female that I was tracking all day. I was jubilant. I really thought that the only way I would ever get to Kona is if I aged into it. If I was the only woman standing in my 80-year-old age group competing one day for a Kona slot. But it turns out dreams can come true when you least expect it, with a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck.